A Friday night surprise. It was a cool Friday night in Brooklyn. Emily and her husband, Jake, had been together for 7 years. Their lives had settled into a comfortable rhythm: work, home, friends, and occasional date nights. That particular night, they were lounging on their couch, sipping wine and talking about random things, enjoying the peace and quiet. Emily loved these moments. After a long week of work, she just wanted to relax, unwind, and enjoy her husband's company. They had a strong bond, or so she thought, but then Jake brought up something that would change everything. "So, have you ever thought about being with other men?" he asked, a slight grin playing on his lips. At first, Emily thought he was joking. She laughed and shrugged it off. "Yeah, sure, Jake," she said, rolling her eyes. But Jake didn't let it go. His expression was serious, and his tone disturbingly casual. "No, I'm serious. Have you ever considered being with someone else? Specifically, maybe a group of guys? What about black men? 3 of them." Emily's stomach dropped. The laughter died in her throat as she stared at him in shock. Was this some kind of sick joke? The casualness of his voice and the bizarre nature of the question left her speechless. Her pulse quickened, and a tight knot formed in her chest. She could barely comprehend what he was asking. "Jake, where is this coming from?" she asked, her voice trembling. He shrugged as if it were nothing. "I've just been thinking about it lately. I thought it might be something we could explore, to spice things up." Emily was frozen in place. This wasn't just a weird fantasy. It was something he had clearly been thinking about for a while. He kept talking, trying to convince her that it could be fun, that it was just a one-time thing. She didn't know how to respond. She felt blindsided, confused, and, more than anything, deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't the man she thought she knew. Her husband, the man she trusted more than anyone, was suggesting something that felt so wrong, so out of place in their relationship. She tried to change the subject, dismissing it as a bad idea. But Jake wouldn't let it go. Over the next few days, he kept bringing it up. It started with teasing remarks about what it might be like, then moved to more direct suggestions. He mentioned specific friends of his, saying they were cool guys and that nothing had to happen unless she wanted it to. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. It wasn't just some wild, hypothetical fantasy anymore. Jake was trying to make it a reality. She felt trapped between wanting to please her husband and her own mounting discomfort. One night, Jake pushed it even further. "How about we just meet them?" he said one evening over dinner. "No pressure. Just a casual hangout with my friends." Emily hesitated. She didn't want to meet these men. She didn't want to go along with any of this, but Jake kept insisting, making it sound harmless. Not wanting to start a fight, she reluctantly agreed. The gathering. That weekend, Emily and Jake went to a bar in Manhattan to meet Jake's friends, 3 of them, just as he had described. As they entered the bustling space, Emily felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Her hands felt clammy, her throat dry. She didn't know what to expect. Jake's friends were friendly enough, polite, charming even, but Emily could sense the tension in the air. There was an unspoken understanding between them and Jake, and it made her skin crawl. Every smile, every lingering glance, felt loaded with implication. She could feel their eyes on her, studying her in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. As the night wore on, the drinks kept flowing, and the conversation became more flirtatious. Jake seemed to enjoy watching her interact with the men. He sat back, sipping his drink, a smug smile on his face. Emily, on the other hand, felt like she was in the middle of a dangerous game she didn't want to play. One of the men, Marcus, kept giving her long, lingering looks. He stood a little too close, his hand brushing hers whenever he could. It made her heart race, but not in a good way. Emily glanced at Jake, hoping he'd intervene, but he didn't. He just smiled, as if he was enjoying watching her discomfort. By the time they left the bar, Emily's nerves were shot. But the night wasn't over yet. "Let's go back to our place," Jake said casually. "We can relax there." Emily didn't want to go. She didn't want to take these men back to their home, their private sanctuary. But Jake insisted, and she didn't know how to say no without causing a scene. She went along with it, hoping that maybe once they got home, things would settle down. But things didn't settle down. The moment they walked through the door, the atmosphere shifted. The men were more relaxed, but that only made Emily more nervous. She busied herself in the kitchen, trying to avoid the growing tension in the living room. Then Marcus walked in. Crossing the line. Emily was at the kitchen sink, rinsing out the wine glasses, when she felt Marcus's presence behind her. He stood close, too close. His breath was warm on her neck, and she froze, unsure of what to do. "You need help with that?" he asked, his voice low. She shook her head, her heart racing. "I've got it," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. But Marcus didn't move. He stayed close, leaning in even more. Emily's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Then he whispered, "You look like you want this." Emily's blood ran cold. That was it. She had to get out of there. Without a word, she backed away from him, her body trembling as she bumped into the counter behind her. She wanted to scream, to call for Jake, but she felt trapped. How had things gotten so out of control? How had Jake let this happen? She glanced toward the living room, hoping Jake would walk in, but he didn't. He was in the other room, laughing with his friends, completely oblivious, or worse, aware and indifferent. Emily was on her own. She pushed past Marcus and walked into the living room, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The men were still laughing, and Jake was still smiling, acting like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Emily sat down on the edge of the couch, gripping the cushion as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the night. She felt betrayed, confused, and angry. How could Jake put her in this position? How could he watch her struggle and do nothing? She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but she couldn't find the words. She felt powerless, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake's friends got up to leave. As they walked out the door, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. But the tension between her and Jake remained. Once they were alone, she turned to him, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "What was that, Jake?" Jake looked at her, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?"
"That."
"Tonight," she exclaimed, motioning toward the door. "What were you thinking?" Jake shrugged, his casual demeanor only making her more furious. "It was just a bit of fun, Em. You didn't have to do anything you didn't want to." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Fun? How could he call that fun? He had put her in a situation where she felt completely powerless, and he acted like it was no big deal. The argument that followed was intense. Emily had never been so angry with Jake. She tried to explain how scared she had been, how uncomfortable, how close things had come to crossing a line. But Jake didn't seem to get it. He kept brushing it off, insisting that it was just a fantasy, that she could have stopped it at any time. "You're overreacting," Jake said finally, his voice cold. "Nothing happened. You're making a big deal out of nothing." That was the last straw. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her phone and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Jake asked, his voice sharp now. "I need some space," she said, her back to him. "I need to figure out what I want. Because right now, I don't think I can do this anymore." Jake didn't say anything, and Emily didn't look back. She walked out the front door into the cool night air and started walking down the street. As she walked, she realized something. For so long, she had been so focused on making Jake happy, on trying to keep their marriage together, that she had lost sight of herself. She had ignored her own needs, her own feelings for too long. But not anymore. Emily didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She deserved better. And she was going to find it.